Art of the deal. When tariffs happen, tariffs are good because of U.S. jobs. And when he takes the tariffs away, that's actually good because it's a strong negotiating position. And when the tariffs come back, it's actually really good for U.S. jobs in manufacturing and factories. But then when the tariffs go away, it was actually a really good negotiating tactic. But then when selective tariffs come back, it's good for some U.S. jobs and it's good for some domestic manufacturing. But then when some of those exemptions are changed, it's actually really good art of the deal negotiate. Like,
this is at least partially the news that so many investors were hoping to hear.
This is exactly what people were asking for. The one thing that's sort of missing in all of this is the clarity.
Dude, I'm done. I'm done with the media. I'm done with Donald Trump. I'm done with the dumb Americans. I think we deserve this destruction, okay? Donald Trump did the same thing he always does. He broke something. Everybody went, what are you doing? You are killing my children. And then he turned around and was like, I'm not fixing it. I'm not fixing it. And then when push came to shove, he was like, okay, I won't break it any further. I'll break it only a little bit. And now everyone's like, brilliant chess move, Mr. President. What the are we doing? What are we doing? Oh, finally, a brief respite that everyone was demanding. Finally, the markets will breathe again. And it's like, dude, none of this had to happen. What the are we talking about? This has literally been the exact same thing that Trump did his first administration. He did it in this first tenure. Term one, he did this exact same. Term two, he's doing the exact same thing. And he's done it over and over again in the past 3 months. It is so psychotic. I cannot comprehend how these people are so delusional, how they have deluded themselves. I make a stupid decision, something really bad happens. I convince my followers the problem is now magically solved.
it's all right, bro. Kamala would have been the same. That's what you said, right? Good news for U.S. consumers that President Trump has now exempted imports of smartphones, computers, hard drives, computer processors, and memory chips from reciprocal tariffs, so they won't face the 10% global tariff or the extra 125% on China. Art of the deal. When tariffs happen, tariffs are good because of U.S. jobs. And when he takes the tariffs away, that's actually good because it's a strong negotiating position. And when the tariffs come back, it's actually really good for U.S. jobs in manufacturing and factories. But then when the tariffs go away, it was actually a really good negotiating tactic. But then when selective tariffs come back, it's good for some U.S. jobs and it's good for some domestic manufacturing. But then when some of those exemptions are changed, it's actually really good art of the deal negotiate. Like, the best tweet about all the tariffs and everything was 55, 55, 55, 55, 55, 55. Where is it? It was that one. It's just the perfect encapsulation of this administration. Where is it? Wait, when did the tariffs originally go into effect? I did retweet this, right? I don't get it.
All right, so here's your small fries and your small drink.
Thank you. You know, I'd like to pay for the guy's meal behind me, too. You know, just pay it forward.
Oh, wow, that's really nice of you.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe it'll catch on.
All right, well, you have a great day, sir.
Stop! Please let me go! Please let me go first! I'm doing something!
Hi, can I take your order?
55 burgers, 55 fries, 55 tacos, 55 pies, 55 cokes, 100 tater tots, 100 pizzas, 100 tenders, 100 meatballs, 100 coffees, 55 wings, 55 shakes, 55 pancakes, 55 pasta, 55 peppers, and 155 taters.
Okay, that'll be $680.
Okay.
Shit! Hey!
Hey, come on, what the hell's going on up there?
Not paying it. You have to! The guy did it for you! You're the guy! Oh, just do it! You're rich! What?
Hey, what the hell's going on up there?
This guy's trying to start a pay-it-forward chain. Look what you did, you rich little fuck! Come on! Oh no!
Thought you could just pull that shit on me? Fine. You win. That's fine. I just wanted to do something good this morning before alcohol class. But you won. That's the last time I try to do something good ever again.
Maybe you did have some good intentions. Maybe I did.
Oh! I can just run!
Okay. Are you enjoying Gleba Planet? It seems like an interesting planet, but the I like the DLC so far. I think there are a lot of quality of life improvements. I think it's cool. Okay, glad I'm playing again, and I will sink a month into this. But I think that not to sound like an elitist fucking loser, but if you've beaten space exploration, I think the DLC is there's not going to be any challenges in here that are like whoa, or at least none that I've come across yet.
Okay, now for something that is, well, not cathartic, but we are going to watch a Roach King nuke him.
I'm sorry, I'm not at that point yet in my journey where I'm able to accept VTubers.
Himself in a couple.
Reported crime is.
Did Wick or yeah, Wick and Lactoid were on Tim Pool, right? Is there a different channel for this, or what was this?
Social state. This morning, Donald Trump put out a truth social statement saying Russia has to get moving. Too many people are air dying. Typo. Thousands a week in a terrible and senseless war, a war that should have never happened and wouldn't have happened if I were president. Well, we are heavily focused on other things, such as tariffs and potential escalation with China and their retaliation, as well as this trade war, or largely the trade war. But the issue of Ukraine is not over, and Donald Trump is bringing it up once again because, well, he's trying to resolve it to some degree. But what does that resolution actually look like, and what should we as Americans do? We're going to debate the issue. We got a couple of gentlemen joining us to have this discussion. Sir, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Name's Wick TV, and I run a podcast on YouTube of the same name. And I'm here to support Ukraine and advocate that we continue to aid Ukraine and even ramp it up a little bit.
Oh, interesting. And then, sir, who are you?
Yeah, I'm Lactoid. You can find me at Lactoid TV on Twitch, X, and YouTube. I am a libertarian lawyer. My position on this is that it's time for the U.S. to withdraw funding and to keep that money here at home.
All right. Well, this should be fun, my friends. If you're just tuning in, smash the like button. Of course, share this show far and wide. It's Friday morning. The Culture War is live, and we're going to be having this debate. So share the show if you really do enjoy it. So who wants to go first? Why we should or should not be supporting this country?
I'll take it away. So here, look, Ukraine has been unjustly invaded by an aggressive force, Russia. This isn't the first time Russia has invaded other countries. They did it in Chechnya. They did it in Georgia. They did it before in Ukraine in 2014, and they're doing it again now. The idea that if we suddenly withdraw our funding, if we withdraw our forces, if we decide to just, let Putin have this little bite now that he will somehow stop is ludicrous. It's naive. Putin will not stop. He must be stopped. We have a situation where we are and should be funding more money into Ukraine because that money doesn't just go to Ukraine. It goes to American jobs in American factories, building American weapons to fight America's enemies and support America's allies. We made in 2024 $316 billion selling foreign weapons selling our weapons to foreign countries. This dwarfs the numbers that we've given in aid to Ukraine. And this demand spiked in 2024 by 26%, in part because we have shown ourselves, at least to some degree, to be a reliable ally. And so Poland, the Netherlands, other countries want to take and help rearm. They're up in their GDP, but there's more money out there than there is stuff. So we have an opportunity now to rebuild our industrial base and use Ukraine as a way to do that, because there's other conflicts coming. We have a trade war with China coming up, right? Trade wars can often turn into something a little bit hotter, and it behooves us to be prepared for that. And I think Ukraine is a good reason to do so. That's my argument.
Yeah, I mean, my argument's pretty straightforward. I think we've been sold a lie when it comes to the war in Ukraine. We've been sold this tale of a David versus Goliath, this fledgling democracy that's being threatened by this massive authoritarian power, when the reality is the truth is much more complicated. I mean, here we are $200 billion later, and all we've managed...
It's not $200 billion. But this guy is incapable of being honest about anything. Lactoid is one of the worst faith debaters on the internet.
And to buy for ourselves is about 500,000 dead, probably more at this point. Another 500,000 wounded, some critically, probably more at this point. And this was all done in service of a power structure in Ukraine that's becoming increasingly authoritarian, a power structure that was founded upon a illegal and unconstitutional coup that disenfranchised millions of people in the East that we just don't seem to care about. We didn't seem to care about it in 2014, but it's the direct cause of what's going on now. And on top of all of that, Ukraine is losing, and Ukraine continues to lose every single day, despite the fact that we're dumping money into it. And last time I brought this up, you and your comrades kept hammering, well, Kursk, they have Kursk. Kursk is gone, right?
No, it's not.
Ukrainians have lost Kursk.
They have not. They still have forces in Kursk today. Not as much, right? Not as much of Kursk, but today.
They have a single-digit percentage fraction of what they had, and the Russian forces are moving into Sumy. I'm following the war every single day. The Russians make gains every single day. The Ukrainians lose ground every single day, and we're dumping money into this dumpster fire.
Let's start here. Why did Russia invade Ukraine?
Well, Russia has always wanted to regain Ukraine. So Putin has said many times in his interview with Tucker Carlson and in speeches and in other statements that he wants to regain the imperial power of Russia, to establish greater Russia. And Ukraine, in his mind, is part of that project. He believes that they are ethnically Russian, that Ukrainians don't exist in a real way, and he just wants to bring them into his fold, right? That's his belief structure, and that's why he's doing this. This nonsense that people will say about, like, oh, it's NATO expansion, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. It's not. Putin has been very clear. He's doing this because he believes that Ukraine doesn't exist and Ukraine is part of Greater Russia, and he'll have it back.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of American propaganda version of whenever the enemies are going to,
that's what Putin has said.
Well, no, it's more complicated than that.
We might need something. I don't know if I can watch this whole video. The Lactoid guy is just so unbelievably, like, he's such an absolute cum slut for any like Russian propaganda related to Ukraine. It's just like the copy pasted talking point. I don't know how much we'll get into this. We'll see.
as I think we're going to visit a lot here, a lot of the claims here that are being made are more complicated. There's more gray area than I think you're giving credit for. The reasons for the war in Ukraine are complex, and there's many of them. But some of the main issues are the disenfranchisement of millions of people.
It's a fucking lie. It's a fucking lie. Do we know all the Russian talking points? So, okay, here's our Russian propaganda talking points. The first one is that people in the East have somehow been deprived of their voice, and the rationale for that is because it wasn't allowed to split off and form its own country, which, one, even if they wanted to, you're not allowed to do that. If everybody in New Mexico said they wanted to be part of Mexico, we wouldn't allow them to do that, number one. Number two, there was no majority polling anywhere, even in Crimea, prior to the invasion, that said that a majority of people wanted to leave and join Russia. Number three, the only reason why there are a ton of ethnic Russian to Russian speakers there is because millions of people from Kazakhstan and Ukraine were, we'll say, starved to death during the Holodomor, and then a bunch of Russians were shipped in. That argument is stupid. The next one is going to be because Nazis in Azov or the Ukrainian military were slaughtering civilians in the Donbass, and they'll always point to that. The reality is there was an active war there being fostered by Russian support, and the people that are dying as a result of a war going on there, not because Ukrainians are targeting ethnic Russians for ethnic cleansing or whatever, which is another propaganda talking point. NATO expansion is another stupid one. The fact that there was a coup in Euromaidan that was U.S. backed, like an Orange Revolution or whatever the fuck, is another one. I don't know what color they assign it. Like, these are the main Russian talking, and he's going to go through every single one of these.
But some of the main issues are the disenfranchisement of millions of people in Crimea and the Donbass and really the east of Ukraine that happened in 2014 when there was a unconstitutional, unpopular coup that took place. It's not a distraction. That matters. If we care about constitutional order and we care about democracy, we can't just ignore it when it benefits our enemies.
Even if I grant you this.
Hold on, one last thing. The NATO expansion is also, of course, going to be one of the major factors. A few days before the invasion, a demand was made, don't let Ukraine join NATO. That demand was ignored. It's up to them. And then a few days later, the invasion, the 2020.
What, like NATO was like a day away from accepting Ukraine? What? Okay.
Coup invasion happened.
It is up to them. Why wouldn't it be up to them? If we're going to, let me ask you this. Do you think that a country's sovereignty matters?
I think that a country's sovereignty matters to an extent.
To an extent.
To an extent. I think
let me ask you a question. If the Colombia protesters, right, the ones who supported Hamas and things were like, you know what? And they're citizens. I'm not talking about the student visas and things like that. The citizens.
Why do we just presuppose that Russian demands should be 100% accepted no matter what? Oh, nobody believes that. Nobody believes that. The problem is that most people are too fucking cowardly to argue for the positions that they actually hold. The actual position that Lactate holds is that he just doesn't give a fuck about anything going on over there, and he doesn't want to waste any fucking money on it. That's the actual position. But they're just too scared to actually admit that for some reason.
Colombia were like, you know what? We hate America. We want to be part of Hamas now. We want to join Gaza. So we're going to vote to join Gaza. Do you think that would justify in any way, shape, or form Hamas coming in and attacking America in order to liberate the Colombian protesters who have decided that, oh, we want to be part of Gaza now?
It's disanalogous, and I'll explain why. A better analogy would be, let's imagine if Canada had an unconstitutional coup that was undemocratic and was against the will of the vote that had just happened, let's say. And there were parts of Canada that were thus disenfranchised because, like many countries, certain areas tend to vote for certain candidates more than others. And then on top of that, this new illegal government reached out to Russia and attempted to join SISTO and attempted to put Russian missiles on the border with the U.S. This
is disanalogous in like 50 billion different ways. What does that even mean? I don't even know where to start for how disanalogous it is. So let's say that there was a coup in Canada. Would the United States start invading for any reason to take territory? And then why would they be bringing in missiles or joining in a military alliance? Like none of this makes sense, because the coup in Canada, to make this more analogous, it would have to be like there was an American supporting candidate and then this doesn't work for so many different reasons. Oh my God.
Power it is myopic to think that the U.S. wouldn't do anything. The tanks
Hold
are
on.
rolling in the next day. We were willing to end the world over the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, despite the fact that we had invaded Cuba in the Bay of Pigs just a year prior. There are
Okay, firstly, we didn't invade the Bay of Pigs. That's why it's called the Bay of Pigs. We didn't actually invade. Okay, we kind of hung them out to dry. Number one. Number two, the rationalization there is you are in a Cold War with an enemy that wants to put nuclear missiles like within 50 miles. How far is Cuba from the Florida coast? That wants to ship nuclear missiles right next to your fucking country in a way that could very obviously foreseeably escalate to a nuclear war, like immediately. These situations are not at all comparable, okay? This is just not even remotely comparable. Also, we were ready to destroy the whole world? No, we weren't. We were ready to sink some ships going to Cuba. What are you talking about?
There are certain lines that great powers, red lines that they have, and one of them is, and Russia's made it clear, Ukraine, for many reasons, is one of the red lines here. They made that clear before the invasion, and they've made it clear since.
The question I have is, why Ukraine? What about literally any other country?
Well, I
about
do
Burma?
think we should. Well, I do think we should support Taiwan, for example, as another country where I think we should draw red lines and we should not let imperial powers come in and start taking chunks. And the reason why is because it's in our interest. And these are the key words. Ukraine is in our interest because Ukraine is connected to a lot of European countries. We have Ukraine isn't just the only country that borders Russia. You have Estonia bordering Russia. You have the Balkans, right? And you have, well, now Finland and Sweden and things, but they weren't part of NATO before the invasion. But this matters because the reason why a lot of countries in 2004 joined NATO was because...
The motivation of Lactoid has to be something more than just not wanting to be involved in Russia. Couldn't he just grant that what Russia's doing is bad? No. Don't. Would you ask a Zergling what it thinks about invading... Fuck, I don't remember the names of any Protoss planets. You wouldn't, right? You wouldn't ask a Hydralisk, all right? You wouldn't ask an ant, all right? You would look at the Queen. You'd go to the hive mind, all right? Lactoid is a full-on, fully self-sustains his life from the existence of Daddy Trump. Anything that Trump does, he will work to justify. So there are no whys. The whys are going to be a useless, amalgamation of post hoc rationalization to try to make some sloppy thing work. That's it. There is no why. It's because Trump said it and willed it, and then people like Lactoid will engage 100% of their mental faculty to try to justify it. That's the answer.
They foresaw this Russian imperial NATO before the invasion. But this matters because the reason why a lot of countries in 2004 joined NATO was because they foresaw this Russian imperial aggression that was coming. They were worried over their sovereignty and they wanted protection from that. So if we abandon Ukraine, what that does is it sends a signal to our allies that are our actually allies, the NATO allies that we have, that, you know what, if it costs too much, then maybe we're going to abandon them too. And that creates a very dangerous situation.
But Ukraine is not an ally of the United States.
Ukraine can be, and I think it should be.
Sure, but that's not what I'm asking.
It's an art.
Because it's not. And so it's understandable what you're saying, that if, say, Lithuania saw an incursion from, Russia brought troops into Belarus, and then, or Kaliningrad started launching incursions through the border of Kaliningrad.
Yeah. What the fuck is Kaliningrad? I'm going to be totally honest. I only know about this place because of the map games that I play. What is that? Does anybody live there? Does it do anything? Is anything going on over there? Well, I literally know it's Prussia that got cut off by the formation of Poland. Oh, okay. Weird.
Yeah.
But Ukraine's not an ally, nor are they a member of NATO, nor the EU. So for what is the reason the U.S. intervened in this regard?
Again, because it's in our interest.
What are those interests?
Sure. One of our interests
the military-industrial complex. That was one of the things you mentioned. Is creating American jobs. It's a way that we can.
That is
on
one.
The military-industrial complex.
That is one of our interests. But another of our interests is create stability in this region.
I don't know how much. Oh boy, I don't know how much Wick prepared for this, but I can tell he's not 100% locked in. It's good to be able to run down why are we involved in this war? What are the reasons for it? What are the reasons the war happened? And then to like flesh that out. Even like typing out an outline beforehand can be a good way to prepare. But he's either nervous or hasn't like written down all of these things and formally prepared for this. So this might be rough. Good luck.
Because if Ukraine falls, like we talk about the cost of supporting Ukraine, we got to talk about the cost of not supporting Ukraine. What happens if we abandon Ukraine and Ukraine falls? What happens to our interests? What happens to the cost to American consumers? Trade, we have about $1 trillion, a little less, a year with Europe in trade. And if that is disrupted, right, it just hurts our wealth at home.
What would disrupt that?
So, for example, if Ukraine falls, a lot of our European allies will see us as unreliable. And I'll give you an example of this happening. When Trump canceled, briefly, paused the aid that was going to Ukraine, cut off intelligence and things like that, the EU began to question its purchases that it was making from us.
Did it stop them?
When it comes to us. It has granted them, so the EU has talked about they are no longer going to want to source some of the parts that they get for their munitions and their things from us because we are no longer reliable. They're setting up, I'm not sure if it's in place yet, but they're setting up a system where they buy from themselves because they realize that, maybe under this regime.
It doesn't sound like that's related to Ukraine, though. It sounds like it's related to Trump's trade issues.
No, this was before the trade issues.
So you're saying that
this is before the trade imports and anything like this. This is when Trump canceled or paused, I should say, the aid we were giving to Ukraine that we had already allocated to give to Ukraine. He paused that so it wasn't coming in. He also canceled the intelligence sharing that we were doing. And again, like Europe is on this doorstep, and a lot of Europe are our allies, and they see. And they're watching how America is going to support them because by supporting Ukraine, we are supporting them. We are making the world safer for them. And that's a direct benefit. It is not a wild assertion.
They're not an ally. As Tim said, they're not an ally, right? You're saying they could be an...
Is Israel an ally? When we say like ally, I'm kind of curious. So you have NATO, which is like your formal like military thing, right? Like NATO, there's formal treaties. Like if we go to war, if somebody attacks somebody, like we can see, like people are going to intervene. Now, in practice, I know that we will help Israel in a variety of situations. But is Israel? What does it mean? Like, do we? I don't think we have like a formal treaty with Israel, do we? We might. Do we? I feel like I've never read that happened. So, aside from NATO, I don't know if we have like formal allies at all. I just don't know if that's like a thing. But
an ally, and I understand that U.S. aid and several other.
But you understand that, like Estonia is our ally.
Estonia is our ally. They're a NATO ally,
right?
And I would agree.
The Netherlands is our ally.
For sure.
France is our ally,
and
correct?
They're covered under
They
Article
are all
5.
wanting us. They are all wanting us to support Ukraine.
Well, I'm sure they are. That's less money that they have to spend. I'm sure they all want us to.
They're all ramping up their money.
Good.
What are you talking about? They are ramping up their money and spending.
I don't control their money. Okay, if they want to spend money, I can't stop. I don't think it's a good idea, but I can't stop them. But if you're saying, they want us to spend this money, I'm sure they do, right? I don't think that we should. Not only for the reasons that I outlined before, but because you're openly talking about, well, it's in our interest because of the military-industrial complex.
And our interest makes Americans safer, and it makes the world safer.
No, it's in our interest.
There is a law that designates non-U.S. allies, and Israel is one. Oh, okay. I didn't even know this. Hold on. Designation of major non-NATO allies. Australia, Egypt, Israel, Japan, the Republic of Korea, and New Zealand shall be deemed to have been so by the President of the... Oh, okay. Cute.
Hegemony has made the world a safer place.
Ukraine,
a better place.
You really think
not just for America?
You really
but
think
for the world.
Ukraine was more stable or less stable after? Do you think it was more stable, or sorry? Do you think
it was more stable or less stable after Russia invaded? I think it was less stable.
Hold on. Do you think Ukraine was more stable after 2014 than before?
Of course not.
Okay. What happened in 2014?
In 2014, Russian sent little green men into Crimea.
What happened before then?
They locked down, right? They locked down the parliament so no one can get in. Men with guns, right?
What happened before then?
They forced a vote.
What happened before then?
let me read the exact resolution here. That's why I took some notes.
I'm sorry.
UN Resolution 68262, right? The invalid referendum on 16th of March 2014, where Crimea declared its independence and joined Russia. This was obviously
Why'd you put that in Why'd you put that in scare quotes?
Because it was, again, as the UN resolution says, invalid.
You're saying it's
and
invalid.
We recognize it's invalid.
I'm asking you why
International
why was it invalid?
It was done under duress.
Was it?
Because Russians sent their little green men in. They brought guns. They locked down the parliament. They forced the vote.
What's little green men?
Little green men. So they have green uniforms. They rip off their badge, right? So they're not actually Russian soldiers, and they go in and they do their thing, and they have some plausible deniability, which people like my comrade Lactoid here will say, oh, that's obviously not the Russians, it's just some paramilitary.
Well, I want to educate Wick a little bit on this. So obviously there were Russians there. I'm not denying that the little green men were Russians, obviously.
Russian soldiers, to be
yes,
clear.
of course, from Sevastopol, for sure.
With guns.
Yep.
No, not from Sevastopol. They were Russian soldiers from Russia proper. They either airdropped them in or they came in on ships. It was not just the Russian soldiers who were already stationed in Sevastopol. Sevastopol is the port in Crimea that Russia uses primarily for access to the Black Sea. Black Sea, right? Yeah.
That we're threatening.
Yep.
Okay.
But when I asked you before, what happened before then? I think it's telling that you're just ignoring all the context, as is usual with this conversation. Before you cut me off again, that is usual with this conversation. There's it just happened, right? There's this it just came out of the sky. This invasion just came out of the sky. When in reality, what happened is Crimea had for years wanted to leave Ukraine. In fact, in 1992,
that's not true. In 1992, is he about to say, after the fall of the Soviet Union by 1 year?
They declared independence. Ukraine said, you better nullify that within a week with the threat of force. So then they were like, okay, fine, we're not gonna leave. And
Just
then,
like
and
Chechnya,
then
that's Russia did
we
to
can talk about Chechnya in a second, because I also know about Chechnya. But then in 2014,
how did Russia treat them?
In 2010, there was a president elected in Ukraine, Yanukovych. And in 2014, do you deny that he was unconstitutionally couped?
No, but that doesn't matter.
Why doesn't it matter?
That doesn't matter.
Why doesn't the votes of Crimeans...
Even if you say he was cooed, by the way, like you can just give that if you want. Fine. Yeah, the people cooed him. It was a revolution. The people cooed him because they didn't like the fact that he was going to sell the country out to Russia. They held elections after that. The elected leader was elected, and then things continued on from there. It wasn't like the military installed some leader at the behest of I don't know, some dictator or dictatorial regime. Like,
matter. Does them being disenfranchised matter?
Is
like he says these words, disenfranchised. Like the thing is, this fucking loser would probably just bite the bullet on this. But like a good question to counter this would be like, okay, do you think that there were British people in the United States that were disenfranchised after the American Revolution? But I bet he would probably just say yes.
It doesn't give Russia the right to come in with guns, tanks, and materiel and force the issue. Russia or any other nation does not have the right to come in with force and violate someone's sovereignty
just gotta sit and take it?
to solve an internecine conflict. There are other ways to deal with that.
What way?
Russia did this
what way should
with
Crimea,
military force.
What way should Crimea have handled it?
Any other way but this.
What way?
Because Crimea didn't handle it, Russia did.
What way?
Russia took away their choice.
Why did Russia go into Crimea?
Because it's been part of their plan. They want Ukraine. Putin's wanted Ukraine for a while.
But why Crimea?
Crimea had
Sevastopol.
Pronunciation's hard. There's ports in there that gives them access.
It's Sevastopol.
To what they call warm water ports, right? Because they don't have a lot of those, and it gives them access, and they can use their navies and things like that.
It's the home of the Russian Black Sea Fleet and their only warm water port.
And they're primarily Russians in Crimea as well.
But that wasn't under threat.
Primarily Russians doesn't matter. The fact that they have a that port that they used was already like authorized for use by them. That port wasn't threatened, or at the very least, I never heard anything about that port being threatened. They still had access to it. The idea that like Sevastopol was threatened in some way, or that Russia would lose access to, it doesn't even make sense. Like nobody, at least not that I've heard, nobody's talking about that.
Threat, right?
Of course it was.
Why? What was the threat?
Because
they had a lease
Yeah, I'll explain to you why it was under threat. Okay, it was under threat for a couple reasons. But when you have the pro-Russian president get unconstitutionally couped in 2014, and now you have this country which prior had promised to not join military blocs, is now looking towards NATO, right? There is a concern that if they join NATO, that you're saying that, but that's. How do you, as a geopolitical actor, how do you know that for sure? Especially when you have.
I need more than just a possibility. I need reasonable.
You had a coup. You had a coup. How can you trust this new government when they ignored their own constitution? They ignored Article 108. They ignored Article 111, and they disenfranchised millions of people, millions of Crimeans. And by the way, the UN had done polling in Crimea prior to this and found that most Crimeans would vote to leave Ukraine and join Russia. This was between 2009 and 2011.
Know for sure if they
Pew
would,
Research.
The vote they had, vote they had was conducted under coercive force.
I'm almost done. I think less than 2 months following the annexation.
None of this. This is all such a stupid argument. Like you shouldn't, and I wouldn't, but you could grant every single one of these pieces, and it wouldn't matter. Hi, what's up?
Hey, hello. Do you want me to join in or not? To listen with you, basically, or not? Or just like comment on a couple of things?
If you hear me get anything wrong, you can jump in. Otherwise, it's going to take like 10 hours to watch this video because the Lactoid guy is a literal Russian machine gun talking point. So every single thing he says is going to be.
Yes, I understand. I agree with that. Yeah. Plus, I'm gonna go on Wick's review of this on Monday, so I be there. If anyone has wanted to see like it point by point, then you can do it there. Not to make you watch this for like bajillion years because it will take a million years to dispel everything. Yeah. But when it comes to Crimea, I was a little bit confused because I didn't watch it yet. Not at all. I just not a minute of it. But Wick told me that they brought up in 1994, apparently we invaded Crimea, and I was like,
in 94 or in 2014?
In 95. In 95.
Oh, 95? Okay, I don't know. I don't even know what that's.
Ukraine invaded Crimea, and they wanted to be independent for like 4 years, something like that. And I was like I might be actually tripping. It took me. I don't blame Wick for not knowing because it took me like at least like 20 minutes to understand what they were talking about, because in 1991 Crimea voted to be part of Ukraine, to be independent from Russia. The voting was 56%, so not like a huge majority, but still counts. And it was agreed upon between Russia and Ukraine and Crimea that Crimea is part of Ukraine. So that was like and also one of the things that he mentions that was like apparently we made them was that there was like this situation very local. I don't know how the fuck he knows about it. It must be like him straight up reading Russian like propaganda. But there was like this. You said you don't know if that was threatened, the port with Russia, but it actually was a little bit for a while. For example, in '94. There was like, as you know, Budapest Memorandum, and it was again said that Crimea is part of Ukrainian sovereignty, and Ukraine signed it, and as well as other countries. But then in '95 there was like this coup attempt, basically, by the dude called Meshkov. He was trying to sabotage like Crimea from the inside, basically doing this like we actually need to be with Russia, we belong with Russia, and undermining Ukrainian authority there, essentially, right? And Ukraine then intervened, and they brought National Guard there as well. Dude barricaded himself in the building. That's the invasion they're actually referring to. That's what happened. Okay. And Meshkov didn't even had local support. Most people were like at the time cool with being in Ukraine, and they just wanted things to settle. The thing they did want was autonomy. Sure. And autonomy they were given right after this whole situation was in '97. Also, they said we suspended their constitution, which is not true because we suspended constitution altogether because it was USSR constitution. And we came up with our new one, with the Ukrainian one that included Crimea. And Crimea afterwards was given autonomy. And also in '97, we made a treaty with Russia, which was like Friendship of People, Black Sea Fleet Treaty, something like that, in '97. And that treaty allowed Russia to have 80% control of the Black Sea Fleet in Crimea. And it allowed them 80% of control and also to have all the bases on Earth they want. 80% of control and also to have all the bases on Earth they want. there, which they did have. If you walk Crimea back in the day as a kid, the island is full of like Russian bases, right? Would only ask from us that Crimea remains Ukraine, and Russia will respect the sovereignty, and then they can use fucking all the ports they want, and 80% of the thing is theirs. We signed that agreement with them in '97. So all of that is crap, bullshit, straight up. Yep.
Okay, gotcha. All right, thanks for the info.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Be
Yeah,
careful,
maybe I will jump again
Okay.
if I'm too irritated.
All right.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Be careful.
Of Crimea, and a few, like I think less than 2 months following the annexation of Crimea into Russia.
What I was saying prior to this is that, like, even if you could grant literally every single one of these points, which you shouldn't, but you can grant every single one of these points, and it still wouldn't justify another country invading to start taking over territory. Like, it just wouldn't. The strongest argument you could possibly defend would be them taking over Crimea only. Even that, I don't think in a reasonable debate you'd be able to defend that. But to start taking over parts of the rest of the country is just, none of this is, even if you grant that there was a revolution, even if you grant that it was a coup, even if you grant that it was constitutional, even if you grant that a new leader came in or whatever, like, you can't from that point say, okay, so that means another country should be able to invade and start stealing land. That's just, you can't get there. There's no way you could do that.
Pew Research went in and did a poll, and 88% of Crimeans said that Kiev should recognize the results. Only 4% said no, which is relatively in line with what the referendum was.
Again, they were occupied by Russian forces.
Okay, so
don't say no.
When they weren't occupied, they wanted to leave Ukraine and join Russia. What about that?
In 95, he said, or 94? That's
poll.
Through a UN poll.
Isn't a vote.
A UN, because Ukraine wouldn't let them have a vote.
You shouldn't even have this. You don't, that's just, I'm sorry, but this is not how sovereignty works. You just don't ever, this is a red herring argument, and you should never fall for this argument. In the United States of America, if 75% of people in Arizona voted to leave the USA, you wouldn't allow them to do it, number one, and you wouldn't even make the statement, well, isn't their sovereignty being violated by not allowing, like, aren't they being deprived? You would just never ever grant any of these arguments, because this is a ridiculous argument. It's a ridiculous argument.
And
they tried to have a vote in 1992, and Ukraine said no.
More than just someone calling you up on the phones like, hey, buddy, do you want to secede from your country? You need an actual constitutional Congress. You need something actual.
Would
there.
Ukraine let them have that vote?
At the end of the day,
yeah.
At the end of the day, none of this justifies Russia coming in.
Of course it does.
And of course it does not. We would never let that happen in any other situation.
Ukraine
Russia
did
not let that happen.
No.
What is the law? What is the standard by which you have to allow a group of people a vote to leave your country? I'm sorry, what are we talking about here? This is just not a thing. We wouldn't make this demand of anybody. We certainly wouldn't follow it on our own.
Chechnya tried to secede,
Oh,
right?
no.
When the Warsaw Pact broke apart, when the USSR broke apart, and Chechnya said, okay, we want to go away too. At the time, they were like, no way, Jose. And they came in with military force.
So you support that?
Stomped them down. I absolutely do not, because of the way they handled that.
Whoa, why don't you support
because
that?
of again, as if you listen to that, because of the way they handled that.
What way did they handle it then?
Oh, no, because walking into a terrible... The reason why you can oppose Russia, because I know the next 20 minutes this argument's going to be, Wick is about to say a whole bunch of stuff about how brutal it was when Russia came in to quash the Chechnyan rebellions or whatever, or to maintain control of that territory. And then Lactoid is going to try to draw a one-to-one comparison between what was happening in Donetsk and Luhansk and say, oh, well, there were a lot of people dying down here, and it was a civil war as well. So Russia had the right to come in and save those people too. If you think that the Chechens should have broken off from Russia, then why can't the people in the Donbass break off from Ukraine? The actual answer is that the dissolution of the Soviet Union saw a whole bunch of flux in terms of countries being created or countries breaking off from what was an imperialist empire, right? Like Russia conquered other nations. Some of them joined the Warsaw Pact. Some of them were incorporated into the Soviet Union proper. Others were part of, I don't remember, some parts were like kind of like these semi-autonomous blocks or whatever. But when the Soviet Union was breaking up, there were a whole bunch of people who were like, oh, well, are we going to be a country? Are we not going to be a country? Who knows? And nobody was really sure at the time. After the Soviet Union left, after the Soviet Union was gone from the world stage, from 91 onwards, everybody looked to see what existed, and then people started signing recognition treaties, everything else, and then you had your countries. You wouldn't compare in 91 the dissolution of the Soviet Union and say those rules apply going forward, that any country can break apart from anything. Like the world was kind of set. The European countries were set after 91 when the countries existed, and then people agreed where they were, and then that was it. Like that's it, you know. To say that, yeah, that the breakup of the Soviet Union was a thing, but then after it broke up, you're done. You can't just have other countries breaking up all the time constantly. Just imagine the world, what it would look like if we had Yugoslavias everywhere that were constantly breaking apart and new countries were being formed and destroyed. Like, it just wouldn't work. It would be crazy.
Most human violations of their rights.
Did the Ukrainians do that in the Donbass?
There it is, yeah.
No? So
No,
There was no civil war. There was no bring out the maps showing where the bombs drop, and there weren't people dying, and this is where we're going with this.
Why?
When Amnesty says that they were committing war crimes by firing unguided rockets in civilian
Into
areas,
civilian
that's
areas
just
and killing
thousands
civilians.
of people dead. Who
There you
cares?
go,
So
yeah.
go ahead.
You brought up the vote from Crimea, and so I've been looking into it. I have a question for you. In the 2010 election in Ukraine, which you mentioned,
yes,
Viktor Yanukovych won 49.55% against Yulia Tymoshenko, who won 46.03%.
Yes.
The country was split from the east to the west, with the west largely, and this includes Kiev, largely being in favor of Tymoshenko, and the right being in favor of Yanukovych.
I love that he intentionally calls it. So Kiev, I think, is a more Russian pronunciation, and Kyiv is a more Ukrainian pronunciation. I probably call it Kiev sometimes, just have it. It's just because I speak about Kiev so much. But you know that Tim Pool, like every single day, is like in the mirror, like Kiev, 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 the Ukraine, Kiev, Kiev. You know that he's rehearsing that so that he doesn't give any ground to these filthy Ukrainians, so he can stick it to Zelensky and be faithful to his Russian compatriots.
Yanukovych had his political opposition after this arrested and held for 3 years in prison.
Following 2010?
Yes.
In 2011, Yulia Tymoshenko was arrested for what is largely seen as political persecution and held for 3 years until Yanukovych was ousted.
Sure. And so,
and not to mention,
and hold on.
During
Let me respond to that.
Euromaidan, right? The brutalities that you.
Now, if you wanted to get, you shouldn't bring this up, and it would be a bad debate tactic. But if you think that Yanukovych is a bad guy, you should ask Tim Pool, hey, you remember that one weird dude in the United States, Paul Manafort, who got all those weird charges? What were those charges for? Who was he helping internationally that he didn't declare? Oh shit. Was that Yanukovych? Isn't that crazy how connected that is?
Yanukovych was perpetrated on his.
Do you have a better argument against that than that would be crazy? Against what? Countries constantly dissolving and forming new countries all the time? It would be a threat to economic and geopolitical stability. Economic stability because it would be impossible to form trade agreements and because trade would be disrupted constantly due to the rewriting of rules and the military, battles going on all over the place. And geopolitically, it would be unstable because new governments would come into existence and would go out of existence. And it would be hard to keep track of like who's elected or who's a dictator or who's got sovereignty over what. It would be a disaster. It would be a clusterfuck. I didn't know I had to spell that out. Sorry. Yes.
People, 108 protesters killed brutally.
And 13 cops were killed. So in terms of...
I love that he throws that in there. And they kill the cops.
The political, oppression that came following Yanukovych's election. I'm sure there's criticisms you can levy. I know Yanukovych had issues with corruption. I know that, in fact, Ukraine now has issues with corruption. But just because there are those issues doesn't mean that you can trample upon your own constitution to remove a president and not expect separatism in the places, as you brought up, in the places that overwhelmingly voted for Yanukovych. In Crimea and the Donbass, it was overwhelmingly pro-Yanukovych. Do their votes not matter? Do you just get to replace this president
Let me
in
ask you this,
2014
Lactoid.
with somebody that was not democratically elected, ignore your own constitution? This is what led to the separatism.
Wait, I actually super don't know the answer to this question. In the American Revolution, was there ever a vote or anything among all the colonists to like sign the Declaration of Independence? Was that ever a thing? There was, right? Was there? There wasn't. Was there? Yes, there was. Oh, was there? Okay, I don't even know. Was there like what was that called? The Constitutional Convention. Yeah, sure, but like was this done in a way that like there were equal representations from all the people? Also, wait, hold on. I'm sorry. No, hold on. Fuck you. Constitutional Convention was after, because we had the Articles of Confederation before that. That was after the Revolution. That was after breaking off. For the Declaration of Independence, we broke off from the Crown, from England. Was adopted unanimously by the 56 delegates to the Second Continental Congress, who convened at Pennsylvania State House, later renamed Independence Hall, in the colonial area, or carrier capital of Philadelphia. Okay, so they had delegates. I'm assuming they were elected in some way. Okay.
And the separatism and this new power structure in Ukraine, and this new power structure and separatism is what led to the 2022 invasion.
Well, let me ask you this. Had the U.S. backed and really wanted, right, Yanukovych, political enemy that he jailed for 3 years unconstitutionally, right? If he had wanted, if we...
Well, you don't know the... Also, just make Lactord own it, because I'd like to watch him fucking squirm. How does he feel about the fact that Donald Trump keeps trying to recognize... Is it Guaido? Dude, and also, I mix up Venezuela and Bolivia all the fucking time. Where Trump kept trying to... He invited this guy, I think, to one of his State of the Unions, didn't he? An alternate leader from one of these countries. Fuck. Was it Bolivia? I don't remember, bro. Fuck South America. We don't do south of the equator here. It was Venezuela. Guaido is a Venezuelan politician, opposition figure. Trump was trying to get this guy to like be the president for some period of time, and we even invited him, I think, to the. I think it was to he was either joint address or it was the State of the Union. I wonder if he is okay with that, with trying to recognize some new leader of some other country or whatever. But
details
really
about that, and you don't either.
If he had really wanted, and I'll go with the hypothetical that what Tim just said was accurate, and that was seen and pretty much seen as shady, as illegal, etc. So go with it, run with it.
So I'm mixing up Venezuela and Bolivia all the time. It drives me fucking crazy. They're coded as the exact same country in my head. I'm so sorry. Which one was Hugo Chavez from? That must have been Venezuela, right? Fuck. Chavez. It was Venezuela, right? Okay. I don't know. These places are identical to me. In my brain. They just occupy the same spot in my brain. I know where they are on the map, but I don't know. They occupy the same spot in my head.
Would that give us, the U.S., the right to go in with gun, tanks, men, and occupy and seek to annex parts of Ukraine? Would that have given us the right to do that? I don't believe you. I don't believe you if you say that you think that we would have that.
I think we've talked about matters of scale.
Also, I don't know if I'm the right guy to do this because I suck at doing narratives and stories because I just don't care as much. But somebody in these arguments, we should talk about like what makes America good. What is goodness? Do we have an obligation as a country to support things that are good? Do we believe that there was a good side and a bad side in World War II? Do we believe that? Do we believe there was a good side and a bad side in the Gulf War, in the first Gulf War, okay, against Saddam Hussein? If there was ever an opportunity to intervene in a way where you could stand for a good side against a bad side, and if you have the capability to act, do you not have some sort of obligation to the world, to yourself, to other people, to your own ideals? Like, do you not have some moral obligation to act at all?
In the
matters of scale.
Yeah, no, for sure. Let me explain. In the event that the Constitution was violated, which we don't know if it was, I mean, we had an arrest warrant for Yanukovych issued in 2014, immediately after he left the country. You do have a history.
Fled the country, yes.
He left, yeah, you can say he fled. It's because his car was shot at. If there's a constitutional issue with that, you can say there's major issues. You can, in fact, even potentially, if it's bad.
Also, just again, if this is ever in a history book, just the idea that Tim Pool was one of the largest podcasters in the United States of America. He gave a lot of media where he defended center-right and far-right positions, and he supported Donald Trump in the 2024 election. He would regularly host debates on his show relating to the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. He also was paid $5 million through an illegal shell company being investigated by the United States of America from Russia for a show that he produced for one of their channels. He claims to have not been aware of this. Like, that set of facts is just insane. And the fact that conservatives don't even talk about it, don't even think about it, but we talk about Hunter Biden because of one phrase, the big guy, it's I don't have an adjective for it. My vocabulary is not even large enough to describe how unbelievable that is.
Enough, if there's enough repression, that
to this day, Tim Pool calls himself a victim of the $5 million scam. $5 million scam. I mean, isn't he a victim? It's a lot of money to lose. No. He was paid $5 million. Oh, damn. Okay.
Could potentially justify an invasion based on humanitarian reasons. There is unless you want to say, well, hold on.
And see, even here he's playing a word game. You can justify an invasion under humanitarian reasons, maybe, but what about conquering territory and a unilateral invasion for humanitarian reasons?
Unless you want to say,
I'll say this.
Hold on a second. Unless you want to say, well, we can't invade a country even if like there's gross humanitarian violations, and then that.
And now he's going to say that means that we can't do anything about the Bosnians. That means that we were bad going into into Iraq. That means that we were bad going into Libya. That means
you can't, invading Nazi Germany is out of the question. The Confederate South.
What I'm saying.
We didn't. Neither of those were for humanitarian reasons. What were those two examples? We went into Nazi Germany because we were attacked by Japan, number one, okay? So we were brought into the war. We didn't even know about the Holocaust shit going on, largely. Number two, the Confederate South was our own country trying to break away from us. What are you talking about? What? Like that, the Confederate South and fighting a war against them to unite the country is the same rationalization that Ukrainians are using to go in and fight to maintain the integrity of their territory. Like, these are the two worst possible examples you could ever give to support your point here.
So you can, if there's enough violations of the Constitution and human rights that could justify potentially
Another country going in? Nazi Germany wasn't violating their Constitution. Do you think we went into Nazi Germany because they took apart the, is it the Weimar Republic? That was after 21 or 22 that came into being. That's why we went in, was because they betrayed the principles of their last, this is okay.
Humanitarian intervention.
Human rights.
But what I'm saying is this Euromaidan was particularly egregious. We have a movement that, according to the last poll prior to the ousting of Yanukovych, had about 45% popularity and 48% unpopularity, primarily in the East. And you had the president removed, violating Article 108 and Article 111, and you had separatism. Well, to some extent, it does. The United States had help from France. We had a general Lafayette come in to help us leave.
Hi, go quick. What's up?
Real quick, he's fucking comparing intervention he said, Serbia, Germany, whatever. I told Wick they will bring up NATO Serbia intervention. They killed 100,000 people by that point.
Well, sure, but also it doesn't matter because one, we didn't steal territory from them afterwards.
You didn't occupy them.
Yeah, and two, it wasn't a unilateral mission, right? This was a whole ass thing that I think that one was before the UN even, right?
No. UN actually, America appealed actually to UN, and UN said we did not approve your mission.
We didn't want to what?
We don't want to approve your mission.
Yeah,
of
but I don't.
Serbia.
Did the UN vote against it, or did they just not?
Yes. Yeah, they say they don't want to, basically. And the United States had balls back then, and they say fuck it, and they did it anyway.
It was with all of NATO, though, right?
Yeah, NATO, yes.
Okay.
NATO, yes.
It was with NATO. It was to intervene in an ongoing genocide, although Russia claims that here. But also, we didn't take any territory from the country afterwards. It wasn't there to conquer their territory.
You didn't occupy them. You just bombed them and that's it. You prevented the thing and they gave up and that's it pretty much. Also, excuse me, how are we... name the numbers. He said, there is a point of intervention if something horrible is happening. Something horrible is happening. Yanukovych was ousted. That's it. Where are 100,000 people killed? Where are mass deportations, mass imprisonment? Why he doesn't... He's like, oh, excuse me, they violated the right of... many people here in Kharkiv, most people voted for Yanukovych. That vote didn't matter when he started getting dictatorship laws in power, when he started arresting people. He arrested Tymoshenko, who half the country voted for, immediately. She spent all that time in jail. What about their right then, if he's caring about constitutional shit? He escaped the country. He wasn't in Verkhovna Rada in Kiev when they fucking voted. And this fucking worm is like, oh, of course, you know, you can say he escaped if you want to because he got shot at. No, he escaped because he violated everything. He killed 100+ people, 500 people disappeared. 3 months was against him, revolution was going on. Of course he fucking fled to Russia. He didn't fled because he was just randomly shot at and then he decided I'm going to fuck off to Russia. He was shot at on his way to Russia. It's a completely different thing. And also, where is your fucking proof that we did heinous shit to anyone? It doesn't exist. That's why he doesn't bring it up. There was no killing of people in Donbass until Russia appeared there. None.
Yeah. I mean, these guys don't even cover the U.S. Constitution, so.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's just, how can we fucking compare it with fucking Chechnya? That was a huge war with 500,000 people killed. Like,
Also,
are we serious?
How confident are you in the UN thing? Because I thought there. I'm trying to read about this now. Okay, because I thought I think there were UN Security Council resolutions that were like condemning stuff that was happening in Yugoslavia.
They condemned Serbia and the actions of Milosevic, but they didn't support intervention of the United States and NATO.
Gotcha.
So kind of that. So UN was always ballless and factless, but the United States at the time decided that it doesn't matter, and they still went with it. Basically, UN condemned, which they like to do. They like to, issue condemnations, but they didn't support intervention. That was bombing Serbia, which killed 500 people in Serbia, which comparatively, who gives a fuck, considering what they were doing at the time. So,
more Eastern European on Eastern European hate. I see. Okay.
Yes. If you start, you know what they did to Bosniaks in labor camps? They made them cut off each other's genitalia. So no, I think they well deserve that bombing. So yeah, it's just that it's just a matter of numbers. It's just such a dishonest tactic. He's painting it. You know what? If we actually did, I will give you everyone that. If we, as a Russian-speaking person with a Russian mother, okay, I'm ethnically even partially Russian, right? So if they actually started Ukrainian new government in Ukraine after Maidan, right? Started mass discriminating against Russian speakers, started prohibiting things, started massacring people. I would jailing them. I would obviously see it differently then. So then you would probably can make a point about is intervention required there, because intervention, in my opinion, was required in Serbia and it was justified, right? So you can make that argument. It's not always invasion bad, but also it wasn't an invasion. You bombed them and you fucked off.
Yeah.
Nobody invaded anything. It wasn't an invasion when you conquered territory and made it fucking United States. That never happened. It's a completely different fucking thing. Yeah,
Okay.
so it's just, it's pretty fucking wild. I'm sorry. It's just the comparisons which takes me out. We should 100% have asked, like, who the fuck did they kill in mass? When did it happen? Name it when it happened. And he cannot name it because it happened after Russian invasion of Donbass.
Yeah, gotcha.
And separatist movements as well. Yeah, that's pretty much it for now. Maybe I will get triggered further on, but who knows?
Okay, be careful.
The UK. Let me ask you this: does the U.S. because we argued no taxation without representation, and I think nullifying your vote is essentially removing representation. Do the U.S. have a right to leave the UK, the England? Do we have a right to declare independence?
Sure, they were doing more than just that. They were disappearing people. They were giving people no trial. They were just.
I would be very careful. You can draw comparisons to other places. But now we're getting very contextual when we say, like, did the colonies have the right to leave Great Britain? Did the colonies ever? No, they did not have that. That was not afforded to them under whatever colonial agreement existed. But that's why it was a revolution, right? That's why it was a violent war that was fought in order to break apart from the British, right? But I mean, it depends on what you mean when you say right there, I guess.
Taking them off the street, right? But here's the deal. We don't live in 1700s anymore, and we're dealing in a world that is fundamentally different than back then. And to pretend that we're going to live by the same rules that we did back in 1700, I think is folly. Look, none of this justifies, and this is a principle, right? That a country's sovereignty matters, and a foreign entity cannot use military force in order to violate another country's sovereignty in order to solve a crisis that they themselves have helped serve up. Because let me, if I may finish, Russia has a habit of doing this. Russia has done this before. They did it in Georgia. They took an internecine conflict that was in South Ossetia and I can't pronounce. Abkhazia.
Abkhazia.
Thank you. And they pumped money into them. They sent their little green men in there again, their little Russian soldiers, and they stirred up this conflict. Again, remarkably similar to how they behaved in Ukraine with the Donbass and with Crimea and these things. And they use this as an excuse, right, to go in with military force and take a slice, right? And today, even today, they occupy illegally 20% of Georgians' sovereign territory. Russia, and Putin specifically, continues to do this, and they play this game. So this idea that if we just stop funding Ukraine, it's not our problem, he's just going to stop, has not been borne out by the facts of the matter. If someone continues to exhibit a habit of behavior over and over and over again, what is different this time? Let me ask you this,
Simon. You listed 2 times. That's less than the U.S. has intervened in other countries. We invaded Iraq. We invaded Afghanistan. We got involved in Libya.
We
got
didn't
involved
annex
in Syria.
Afghanistan. We didn't annex
No, we replaced
Iraq.
the government.
But that's a fundamentally different
to a pro-Western government.
And again, I'm not here to support every single thing that the United States has done. And
I'm not here to support. I'm not here to support every single thing the Russian government has done. I'm not. You can point out. And by the way, I'm actually critical of the Russian government when it comes to Chechnya. I think it's surprising that you're not, because. Or that you are, sorry. I think it's surprising that you are critical
about to say, do you
of the Russian government in Chechnya, because the same arguments.
Genocide, man.
Well, it's a little. It's not. I mean, no, it wasn't a genocide, but it was an annexation of a area that wanted self-determination, wanted to be separate because the Soviet Union had just collapsed. But under your logic of the countries are sovereign, we can't get involved, you should be against Chechnya. Because Chechnya was part of the Russian government, wasn't it? It was part of the Russian territory.
The U.S. should have gone in Chechnya?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Hold on.
Indeed.
Just because of the expense and the kind of geopolitical reality on the ground.
From
a moral perspective, we would have been justified.
I think we would have been justified.
We would have strong justification.
Again, until the like the Balkans, right? When we went in, when NATO went in.
Hi, what's up? I got a lot of other stuff to do today, so go make it fast.
Genocide, it is recognized as a genocide in Chechnya. But about the United Nations, I just checked, so I didn't lie to you. Basically, the UN Charter said that they prohibit the use of force, except by decision by the Security Council under Article 42 and 55, like a bunch of states. So the UN supported peacekeeper mission that came afterwards.
Gotcha.
But they didn't support the bombing itself, essentially. And also, that was done basically just by United States and NATO unilaterally. Okay. And they killed 500 civilians, which I mentioned, but they also killed 1,000 members of security forces.
Gotcha.
So, but that was actual forces, not civilians. And then they basically proceeded with that until the troops retreated, until Serbian troops basically said, okay, we are giving up, capitulating. And then that's it pretty much. So then there was United Nations peacekeepers there, but your presence wasn't there as actual occupying force in any way. So, yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
In the 90s, right, and stop the Serbian genocide that was happening there, that the Serbians were conducting, right?
NATO offensive.
Yes, that was good. That was something we should have done, right? And when it comes to the war crimes, like we talk about when war crimes justify intervention, look at Bucha. What happened in Bucha? 498 civilians massacred. Does that justify the U.S. getting involved? I think it does. Look at what they've done by stealing 20,000, at least, children, Ukrainian children, and disappearing them into Russia to serve with Russian families, to live with Russian families, and to be raised as Russian against the will of their parents.
Can you even
does that justify?
Can you even
does that justify U.S.
Hold on. When you say against the will of their parents, what do you mean?
I mean that the parents, they are not allowed to see the kids.
Is that what's happening?
That is.
Do you even know what the Russian argument is on that?
I don't care why
They're orphans.
doing it. It's wrong.
They're orphans, and if the parents are identified, they ship them back to Ukraine. They're orphans. They're orphans. It is absolutely true. They're orphans in combat zones.
That is not true.
They are orphans in combat zones. That is 100% true. Now you could say, well, Russia.
I don't know the details, but I seriously doubt this is the case. I would never believe this. Also, if you made them orphans, why do you have a right to take those children? Even if that was the case that you made them orphans, why would you have the right to take those children and then do with them as you want? Okay.
There's an obligation to send the orphans to Ukraine. That could be a discussion. But again, hold on. The framing here.
Do you not think children should be reunited with their families if we're able?
Wick, they're orphans. They don't have families. They don't have families.
But
it's
they
in a combat zone.
In many cases.
And if their
parents are saying, "Give us."
Go what, Anna?
Last time I swear.
Go what? You got? What do you got?
He just said that children they stole are orphans. This is like genocide denial. It's our claim. ICC gave the court, the United Nations, everyone gave. They are not stealing orphans. Why are they orphans even? How did they become fucking orphans? First of all, people killed, their parents were killed, and second of all, most of those children have family. Their parents, their grandparents, they make the application, so they are returned. What a fucking evil asshole! Like, who makes the applications if they're orphans? People are trying to return their kids, the kids that they rename. They rename them, so they are impossible to find.
Yeah,
just
and even if it was the case, yeah, why would you? I mean, you would never just take kids from a combat zone where you've killed their family and just keep them in your country. Like, yeah, the whole argument is ridiculous.
Russian version of this that nobody supports. He's saying, "Oh, they're just saving pure innocent Ukrainian orphans who has nobody to look after them for some reason." Yeah, it's just wild. Even fucking ICC said that it's a war crime. United States said it's a horrendous war crime. They gave a war criminal warrant to Putin and Lvova Belova, a woman who does the mass abduction of children, basically. And it is, it's forcible. Of course it is. They're being taken from their homes and repurposed in Russia, and their names are being changed. And they're being given passports that are, identification documents that are Russian. Like, what the fuck, man? I thought he was just he's fucking evil, dude. I'm shocked to hear that.
Yeah, this is a Russian propaganda printing point machine, yeah. Yep.
Fucking hell, orphan saving. Fuck this fucking worm. Well, anyhow, I'm gonna go.
Be careful, bye. Okay, I can't.
Let's back our kids.
And every month when they identify parents, they do send them back.
They are making it very, very hard to identify
you're all over
parents.
the place. First,
I'm not all over the place. You are all over the place. Again, let me ask you one more time.
Let me ask you one more time.
You keep not answering the question. Does the Bucha massacre justify, because you have agreed that violations of human rights allow a foreign country to go in militarily, right? So if Bucha's not enough for you, is them snatching these 20,000 orphans, as you call them, off the streets and disappearing them into Russia, is that not enough for you? What about all the other war crimes that have been recognized by the UN, by the ICJ, by the OSCE, right? By these other human rights watchdog groups that they know is happening in Russian-occupied Ukrainian territories, where they are forcing Ukrainian citizens to become Russian, get a Russian passport, and then they conscript the men and send them off to fight against Ukraine. Does that not justify?
Whoa. Hold on. We got a problem with conscription now? Okay, we got a couple questions here.
Yes, if you are making someone...
Wick, please. A couple points here. First of all, you didn't know what was going on with the orphans. You were saying, the children are being...
This is absolutely happening.
Wick, for God's sake. You made the claim, all these children and their parents are begging for them back.
In a lot of cases, yes.
And this is happening in the majority or the vast majority of cases. That's what was implied. The reality is they're orphans in a combat zone, and they're being moved out of the combat zone. There's a genuine discussion to be had as to whether or not the orphans should be sent to Ukraine or whether or not they should be sent.
Pure Russian
Hold on.
propaganda. It's just
Hold
not true.
on.
It's just not true.
Whether I let you finish, didn't I? Whether they should be sent to safer places, I did. Whether they should be sent to safer places deeper within Russia, away from the combat zone. I understand that Russia has annexed those areas, and there are people there now who the Russian government considers to be Russian citizens. And I also understand there's conscription occurring. The Ukrainian government is also conscripting people who don't want to fight. There's plenty of videos you can find right now of vans pulling up, grabbing people off the street, forcing them into the front line.
First of all,
the big reason why this is happening is, hold on, a big reason this is happening is because Ukraine is suffering from a critical manpower shortage, which is one of the reasons why it's one of the reasons why they are losing.
Okay,
now
hold on.
Talk about, I want to respond to, no, you laid out like 8 points. You want to talk about the Bucha massacre?
You keep talking about things, and we keep needing to address them because you bring up points that are just demonstrably wrong.
And I wait for you to finish.
No, you do not, sir. So the Army General Christopher G. Cavoli met April 3rd, right? He's the commander of EUCOM. He's the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO forces, right? He sat down in front of a session of Congress, right? An open session of Congress. And he talked about the Ukraine situation. This is very recent. In this, he testified, right? And I think he would be in a better position to know than you or I, considering the access to the intel he has,
He'd also be biased.
Right? Biased.
He's involved in NATO, isn't he?
Okay. Yes, but he has the duty to tell the truth. Like, here we go. Like saying he's biased because he's a NATO general, right? He's testified that you
one of the things this is like one of the biggest indications of like somebody lying to you is when they will trust one side with absolutely zero criticisms whatsoever. In this case, it's Russia. But then they'll be endlessly critical of another side. Like, why would the NATO commanders tell the truth about anything? Why would the CIA tell the truth about anything? Why would the U.S. government and the State Department and the military, why would they tell you? But then it's like Russia today. Well, Russia said that they're giving all the Ukrainian children back, which somebody linked me something from Yale. This is dated March 17th, 2025. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine includes a systematic campaign of forcibly moving children from Ukraine into Russia, fracturing their connection to Ukrainian language and heritage through re-education, and even disconnecting children from the Ukrainian identities through adoption. Children documented by the Yale Humanitarian Research Lab range in age from 4 months to 17 years, and many of them have families looking for them in Ukraine. More than 19,000 children from Ukraine have been deported to Russia. Only 1,236 children have been returned to Ukraine. The actual number of children remaining in Russia is likely significantly higher. Yale HRL has identified more than 8,400 children from Ukraine who have been systematically relocated to at least 57 facilities, including 13 facilities in Belarus and 43 facilities in Russia and Russia-occupied territory. So this idea that it's like so easy to get them back or that this is happening this is just not true.
Ukraine has solved its manpower issues, and it is currently in a better position today than it was last year.
I suppose my issue with this conversation so far is I still don't understand why I should care about Ukraine. You guys are arguing humanitarian issues. You want to talk about China and humanitarian issues? We can do that. I'm unmoved by the plight of a country that has nothing to do with us.
I think you're just incorrect.
So short-sighted.
When you say it has nothing to do with us. Again, our allies, Taiwan, for example.
So we should invade China.
Why?
Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, these countries rely on us as well.
I think if
China's been invading the South China Sea and sinking Vietnamese fishing vessels, they're building military bases. Should we invade mainland China?
If they invade Taiwan, yes.
Well,
they have a bright red line.
China. No, we don't have to invade mainland. We don't have to invade mainland China. No, that's not what we have to say. We don't have to do that. Okay, bro, fuck this planet.
They took over
There were
Hong
mass
Kong
protests
because
trying
of
to shut it down.
Sure, but the
Hong Kong was
British government had made a contract to give it back in so many years. That was a legal thing.
Is that the authority of a foreign government to tell Hong Kong that they give up their rights?
The Hong Kong citizens, if you want.
The Hong Kong citizens aren't beholden to the will of the Crown of England. So when the protesters in Hong Kong started saying, we do not want the rule of mainland China, and China sent in tanks to crush them.
Yeah, that was wrong. That was horrible.
So like with Crimea, should the U.S. now get involved and support the people of Hong Kong and Southeast Asia in incursions against mainland China?
If we could send aid into Hong Kong, do you think we should? If we could send monetary aid to help smuggle people out, do you think we should do that?
Should the U.S. send...
well, can you answer my question?
I will ask you a question first.
Sure.
Right. Should we sink the flagship of the Chinese fleet in the South China Sea?
If they invade Taiwan, yes. If they
invaded Hong Kong.
Again,
the people of Hong Kong did not.
Did China? I'm sorry, it's been a while. Did China do a formal invasion of Hong Kong? Is that real, or is Tim mistaken there? I thought that there were like policing issues and other stuff, but did they do a formal, like, send their military in? Did I miss this? I might not have been paying as much attention back then. Okay. All right.
Characterizing as an invasion is a little bit different. It's a different context.
They sent in tanks.
Again,
the people fought back against it, and they started disappearing them.
Horrible.
So what's the difference between Crimea and Hong Kong?
So in Crimea, there was no contract, right? So in Hong Kong, the British government...
You said there was a lease that Russia had.
With Sevastopol, which is the military... Sorry. Pronunciations might...
So the tanks that Russia had in Crimea were already leased to have been in there at the Black Sea port.
But not to blockade the Ukrainian military bases there, not to lock down parliament there. Again, the British, as I understand it, and again, I'm not an expert on China by any means, but the British had a agreement with the government of China that in 100 years that we're going to give back Hong Kong into China's hands. And the day came and they did that. Now I'm with you. China has done horrible things to the protesters in Hong Kong, horrible things indeed. And there might be an argument. Yes, absolutely.
Our interests, I think, are very much at risk with China right now, considering the seizures, the atolls they've built, and their declaration of ownership of the South China Sea.
Would you think it's beneficial then for us to stymie China's allies to hurt China's allies? Do you think making China's allies weaker would be in our best interest in the United States?
No.
Why not? We're about to have a conflict with China.
The reason I asked the question is that.
I understand that's the reason you ask your question.
The reason we asked the question is that we have
needs to let people finish their question. He's interrupting a fuck ton. Jeez.
Multiple conflicts around the world, and my point was, when you guys are debating the humanitarian issues of Ukraine, I'm sitting here being like, I literally don't care. No, like, you're arguing with him. He's saying, you're saying we should be involved, and you're saying, but
I think you need to. I do actually think for this conflict, I think you need to make a macro argument, because nobody has a macro understanding or a macro care of like the United States anymore. Like, what is our role in the world? Should we give a fuck about literally anything? I think that argument maybe does need to be made. Why should the United States be involved in any conflict? Because people just don't have that intuitive feeling anymore that we should be.
There's humanitarian issues. I know you're arguing other things too, but in that context, I'm just like, I literally don't care.
Let me explain my position a little bit more. So I think perhaps there's some agreement that me and Wick have on the extremes, which is that if you have a sufficient humanitarian crisis or a sufficient erosion of democratic principles or constitutional principles, that could justify intervention in certain circumstances. I think we all believe that, right? Like,
no.
Okay, intervention in Nazi Germany. We all agree.
I mean...
Stop them from doing what they were doing.
The issue with Nazis...
Why does he keep citing that we didn't go in? World War II wasn't about us stopping the Nazis, like, from genociding people. That's not why we entered World War II. I don't know why he keeps bringing that up.
Germany goes beyond humanitarian issues. The U.S. did not invade...
So does Ukraine, and so does China.
The U.S. did not...
fuck, even Tim Pool knows the answer to this.
...not invade, storm the beaches of Normandy because of the Holocaust.
But if we knew about the Holocaust, and even if Germany wasn't doing all the other things that we invaded them for, I think that would have been sufficient reason to invade Germany. Right?
So we should invade China now?
No,
I mean, they're giving forced abortions to Uyghur women.
I'm not. Let me explain. I'm not saying that we should invade China now. I understand there's a lot of it's a different situation, and we can go into the minutia of the different factors that are involved. But what I'm saying is that if you do reach a certain threshold, I think, and it's possible to intervene, I think that there is a justification to do so. The question here is, does Ukraine deserve U.S. intervention? Is it worth $200 billion? What are we getting out of this? What's Ukraine getting out of this, right? And
Ukraine's getting the right to exist.
From what I see is that really what's happening is, you said something on a while ago that I thought was actually kind of profound. Your belief on the Israel-Palestine conflict is that, Palestine needs to be allowed to lose. I sort of believe that about this as well. I think that by giving Ukraine weapons at this point, all we're doing is we might be slowing the progress of the Russian military to some extent, but it's dramatically increasing the casualties, and the end result's going to be the same.
You may believe that, but that is demonstrably untrue by the facts of the matter. But I want to talk.
And it's not even a country.
Again, you keep saying
it's an
things that are
authoritarian.
just not true.
No, it is.
You keep saying things.
You
that
can
are
look
just
this
not
up.
true,
You can look
that
this up.
The people who have much more
should we invade
access.
Do I think we should invade Gaza?
Should we invade Gaza?
No, absolutely not.
Well, why not? There's a humanitarian crisis.
Again, there are levels of intervention, and this is why I asked you the question earlier about Hong Kong, about, well, in this case, would you be okay, not with military intervention, but with us intervening with aid money? Do you think that...
For Hong Kong?
For Hong Kong, yes.
I don't think we should be involved in it at all.
At all?
Yeah, at all.
Right. Well, this is where I disagree. I think that well, let me ask, are you an isolationist? I don't actually know.
What does that mean?
An isolationist is someone who doesn't want to...
How long has Tim Pool been talking politics and talking all these wars and everything, and he's never heard the term isolationist before? What?
Foreign involvements at all. So, for example, okay. So, let me ask your line then. At what point would it be sufficient? What do you care about? What would you care about in a foreign land that says, okay, the U.S. needs to get involved in this?
What does it mean by involved?
Whatever you think.
Oh, maybe he's just testing. Wait, maybe, yeah, maybe. Fuck this planet. It's okay. I'm gonna figure it out.
It means
so, like a trade negotiation.
Perhaps
we're buying rare earths from China, so we negotiate a trade agreement.
Rare
and that is fine.
So when I'm talking about conflict. So if there's a conflict in China, for example, with the Uyghur Muslims, would that be something you should care about? That hey, we need to stop this from happening.
You got any of them
that's a coin
rare
toss.
earths?
I don't know that the U.S. involved in a conflict which could escalate to kinetic conflict, for which it's not a priority of the United States. There's an argument of, wow, it is really bad what they're doing. So maybe we just don't do business there. Maybe it's that simple. Maybe
that's a form of intervention.
Not really.
It actually is, though.
Saying I'm not going to buy bread from you is not me kicking your door in at your grocery store.
You're saying, I'm not going to buy bread for you unless you change this.
It's called a boycott.
I understand, but
There's
it is
nothing
a form
wrong
of
with that.
intervention. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm saying it's a form of intervention.
That's an extremely absurd definition of intervention. Which
I don't agree.
Okay, well then let's define this between kinetic intervention and purchasing boycotts.
There's a whole host of other types of intervention that we can do when we talk about
So when we're talking about should the U.S. engage in forms of warfare, such as sanctions or kinetic conflict, psychological operations, cyber warfare, etc., the answer is no. Should we stop buying from them? Yep. Yeah, if there's a guy who he's got animals and he's a butcher and he tortures the animals before he kills them, I ain't buying from him. I'm not intervening. I'm just saying I'm not going to go. That guy's crazy.
Do you think there's any foreign situation where you would be in favor of the U.S. using a kinetic intervention?
Probably.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, like the most difficult.
Import nuclear from novice and use robots to connect everything in glib. Robots are an unethical play style, and if you use robots to shortcut your genuine logistics supply chains, you are an unethical player. Okay?
Difficult position is, should we have gotten involved in World War II? When you have an expansionist power that is ethnically nationalistic, authoritarian, we did not know
Russia. But go ahead.
I mean, it's a bit extreme considering the Holocaust, but we didn't know the Holocaust was happening before we invaded. There was speculation, there were concerns, but that's not the reason for the U.S.'s intervention, and it wasn't until afterwards. But you basically had the collapse of Europe, the expansion, and don't forget, Nazi Germany was in North Africa. Not to mention the Italy, not to mention Japan. So this was a global war for which the U.S. largely stayed out of until the final few years. So even in the minds of the Americans, we should not be involved. It actually wasn't until we were attacked.
So someone with hundreds of roboports on novice. Roboports are an ethical way of loading and unloading things like your rockets to your spaceships, because I think these can only be loaded by oh no, they could be theoretical, but that's fine. That's ethical. And repairing your walls, that's ethical. Shortcutting solvable logistics problems, though, is not ethical. All right.
that we decided to actually get involved, which is
You
interesting.
think we should have gotten involved earlier?
Probably, well,
Do you think it would? Let me ask it this way:
It's a
Do
coin
you think it
toss.
would be better for the U.S. and the world had we gotten involved in World War II earlier than we did?
No.
No, why not?
Because we don't know what would have happened had things played out differently. What we do know is the time frames by which we acted, we got a result that was largely beneficial until the prevailing powers created what's called the liberal economic order, which has created instability and chaos for generations, and the U.S. entering a bunch of wars they've never declared. The Constitution of the United States effectively ended in the 50s with these declarations of, say, the IMF, the World Bank, et cetera. So there's it's an interesting conversation that actually was lighting up with Douglas Murray and Dave Smith the other day, and it's been one of the principal discussions on foreign policy now. There's a lot of concern over the worldview of people like Daryl Cooper, as well as Dave Smith and others, who have made arguments that Winston Churchill was a bad guy, which I think is largely silly. I think the circumstances of World War II are the offshoot of World War I. World War I was high density nations in dispute for a variety of reasons, came to the industrialization of war, which then leads to the wars it was. It's easy to say, now 100 years on nearly, I would have done it better. Honestly, I have no idea. So if you were to say, should we have gotten involved earlier? Well, I don't know, because the outcome could have been substantially worse.
Sure.
Right now, what we know is the Nazis were very bad. They were authoritarian. They controlled their economy. They functioned not too dissimilar. The difference between the communists and the fascists and the Nazis was largely on their view of culture, traditionalism, and progressivism. So we don't want an expansionist authoritarian system that takes everything over.
I agree that we don't
But
want.
the liberal economic order has functioned largely like that, only slightly better in some respects.
I fundamentally disagree with that view. I think the liberal world order has made people more safe, more wealthy, and much better off than it was before. But that's another argument. We're talking about Ukraine, Russia today, and I want to, because you said something there that I do think is interesting, like that we don't want authoritarian expansionist powers, and I would argue
Like
that
NATO.
we should have NATO again.
NATO's
There's a
authoritarian?
difference between expanding at the point of a gun, like Russia does, and there's a difference
Do
between.
you respect Aspen now? He still keeps saying that he respects your takes and trusts you and agrees on most issues with you. I mean, I think he has the capability to exercise critical thought, but I feel like he is fully bought in and audience captured and uncritical of the crazy Trump sycophant shit. So whatever that means.
Expanding, say, hey, you want to join NATO? And there's like, you know what? I would like to join
if that's
NATO.
what had happened. But if you look at the history of Ukraine, that's literally not what happened.
Ukraine isn't joining NATO. It hasn't joined NATO. It wasn't even discussions to join NATO. It got nixed, right? It is now because of Russia's actions, but it's probably not going to happen.
And the conflict is largely predicated upon NATO
But again,
expansionist policies.
once again, you have said that, like, oh, it happens in the case of NATO that it's just the same as Russia doing the guns. But no, NATO has largely expanded through voluntary joining. This has happened. Can you give me a country that you think that has joined NATO under coercion?
Right now in Romania, they've removed the populist right-wing candidate from being able to run for no reason. In France, Marine Le Pen
no
has been
reason?
accused of
What
money
does that
laundering.
have to do with joining NATO?
Was Marie
How
Le
is-
Pen, was she accused or was she convicted?
Romania has Romania.
How
has
can
been
I determine whether or not the population of a country is willfully joining a nation when they remove its leaders?
Okay,
So
when
if
do you
Russia,
think
if,
that
if Russia
France
ousts,
joined NATO,
They removed
my
Ukraine's
God.
leader.
if USAID funds protests in
Again,
Ukraine,
Ukraine isn't joining NATO.
So-
Hold on. The few days before the invasion, a demand was said, "Don't you promise never join NATO?" Why didn't they just say, "Yeah, sure, we'll never join NATO. NATO will never
Because
accept
a
them"?
country has a right to make its own choices.
You said they're not joining NATO, so if they're not joining it, why not they just say, "Yeah, we're never going to join"?
Because you don't let a foreign power come in and tell you what you can and cannot do. You say, if we're going to exist as a country, we have to be at least somewhat independent and be able to make our own decisions. They don't want to be a puppet of Russia.
Okay, so they were never going to join it.
But I
And
still
that's-
want an answer.
They were never going to
just
join
real
it.
quick, I still want an answer from you, Tim.
On what?
Which NATO country has joined through coercion?
So my point is, I cannot assess which country is joining free of their free will when we know in these countries they forcefully remove opposition to NATO.
This is such a non-sequitur. This has literally nothing to do.
When a president starts to rise up, say Marine Le Pen, and she says we want to leave the European Union, so they accuse her of crimes,
She
criminally
was convicted.
charge her.
Do we think that was a lie, or do we have any evidence of that? Of course not.
remove her.
Did she do those crimes?
We don't know, and probably
don't know?
not.
Was she-
The argument
That's why
was,
they hold a trial to be able to find out. But
hold on. You're right. You're right. He's completely correct. He's completely correct. You are completely correct. Crimea separated from Ukraine by a vote that was completely legitimate.
No, you can't just vote to leave.
Except for, again,
except
in
that
UN
one.
Resolution 68, they disagreed. Because there was evidence that it was under coercion.
So the
if you
people
have
who are
evidence,
so the people
that
who are
Marilee
largely on the
Le
side
Pen
of
was
opposing
being
Russia.
set up.
So the people who oppose Russia have argued that the election that happened in Crimea is invalid. My point is, you have chosen to respect only certain administrative procedures and not others.
Absolutely.
My position is neutral. We know that they've criminally charged Marine Le Pen. We don't know if it's true or not. If
it is true, should they charge her?
If Marine Le Pen committed a crime, should she be charged?
Yes.
It's a question. Yes.
Should she be removed?
No.
No, why not? Why do you think? Well,
Because
I guess it depends
democratic
on the crime, right?
countries allow for people to vote. So previously in France, when other
Do you think
politicians
felons should be able to vote? Like convicted people sitting in prison right now should be
not in prison.
Not in prison.
There's due process restrictions, but once you get out, your rights should be respected.
If her criminal conviction involved jail time, and I'm not sure it does because I'm not quite up on that case specifically, but say 5 years in jail, do you think she should be able to run from a jail cell? Interesting.
Yes, because in a democratic institution, a democratic country, the people decide. You can't simply have a judge bang a gavel and say
That's not
the people no longer have a right to
I
vote.
can't decide to take away your guns. I can't vote on that. I can't decide to stop you from speaking, to deplatform you. I can't vote on that. And
Yes,
we
you can.
understand that. We understand that because we have a constitution
you can
that
do that.
protects this. We understand that in a democracy, there are certain things.
If Russia wanted to really win the war against Ukraine, then they would stop doing lame shit like abducting Ukrainian children. And what they would do is every single time they capture a Ukrainian prisoner of war, they would lock them in a room and force them to listen to American alternative media 24/7. It would destroy the Ukrainian military morale faster than any other thing they could possibly do.